been 6 and a bit months since my last video, and there's been an awful lot happened. Lots of realizations, lots of testing, lots of trying to sort out ideas, and yeah, lots of improvement. Should have been a little bit quicker, which I'll explain why, but also I've learned a lot in recent weeks, and yeah, it's been a lot of changes, so I'll go through them. Before I start, I'd just like to thank Jamie at Wet and Dry. The address is the shop, it's coming up now. Jamie and the shop have been very good to me. They've helped me out with bits of kit, trying to get hold of bits, letting me test stuff out, coming up with some ideas and stuff like that. And when I've been without kit, they've actually let me borrow kit. So they've been very good. And Jamie's very good at he knows what he's doing. They've got lots of demo kits. So if you are thinking about it and you're obviously in the south of England, then it's worth giving them a shout. Plenty of kit to look at, and plenty of things to try, and always there on the phone if you've got a question. So to go back to the last video, and one of the things that I did was I got the bigger wing, and started to have problems with the rear stabiliser coming out of the water. Came up with an idea of turning the stabiliser over. It's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be think outside the box and see if it makes a difference. This actually is set neutral, and this is what they call a symmetrical air. So the vertical stabiliser was underwater, which gave you a little bit more usable mast length. I tried it, did a few runs on it, and it just didn't feel right. It felt very, very unstable. I can't understand why. It felt like the board was slipping at the back, and the only thing I can think of is that possibly there was turbulence from the front wing being directed down, and maybe that was going over the rear stabiliser. It just didn't feel right. I don't understand why, but it didn't, so I gave up on that. So the next thing to do was to increase the mast length, which I did. Got a 90 centimetre mast. Which made a massive difference. I kept feeling like as soon as I got off the water, I immediately felt like I was too high, and meant I kept sort of touching down. So when I then knew that I had more length of mast to play with, it allowed me to sort of go a bit higher and not panic. So yeah, it was a big difference. It was a big difference. Suddenly I felt a lot smoother. Felt like I had a little bit more time to react, which is an improvement. However, I started to go out and get quite often a problem with the board would start to lift, and then it would just lift and lift and lift, and it didn't matter what I did, I could not get my weight any further forward, and the board would just lift, and then it would tip me off. Almost like foiling at 3-4 miles an hour, but I just couldn't get the board to go flat, and I couldn't figure out why. And then I came up with a theory, which then someone else confirmed to me on one of the forums, and where you put your mast, you also then have your, let's see if I can do this, you have your mast and you have your foil. And what you then try to do is have your foot straps and your weight over the centre of lift of your foil. And that's what we try and do. We control our foil by leaning our shoulders and our weight forward and back. So what normally happens is that as the board lifts, you can see if it's on a fairly short mast, your foil moves forward and back slightly. If you put a much longer mast on, the foil can actually now move further forward and back. So what was happening was, if I hit a little bit of chop or I leant back a bit too far, the foil, as the nose went up, would move forward. Now my centre of my weight is still acting straight down, and what was happening is that the lift was getting in front of the point where I couldn't control with my weight anymore, and of course then the foil lifts and does that. So it was the equivalent of almost me moving back on the board because the foil had more reach as such as the 90 centimetre mast allowed it to lift. So you get more angle of attack anyway, which produces more lift, but because the centre of lift is further forward, you can't get your weight further forward. So that was something I figured out, which was something that then, so I'd have to make a conscious effort as soon as the board would lift to immediately try to bring the board down and keep it level. It meant that there was a couple of touchdowns, which I would have preferred not to have had, but it meant that at least I was still going. And thankfully since then it's not happened, but it was as soon as I went onto the 90 centimetre mast, that's when it started to happen. It was more so on the larger foil, because obviously with the large wing it was further forward as well. So that was something to think about. If you do go to a longer mast, you need to think about the dynamics of what's going on underneath you. So if that does start to happen, you start to get the nose rising up and you can't physically get the weight forward, it's because the mast has moved your centre of effort forward. So get on top of it quickly. I've bought some extra sails this year, and I've gone more down the foiling specific route, and I went for the Naish lift sails. I did try the Ezzy Hydra. Did exactly what it said. It was very powerful, very responsive to pumping. It did feel like a much bigger sail on a 6. It felt like a much bigger sail than a 6, but for me it just didn't feel right. I don't know why. It just felt it just didn't feel like it was working for me. It felt like a bit of a struggle, and I'm all for that. If something doesn't feel right, probably isn't right for you. I then looked at the Naish lifts, which are more of a traditional shape, but they've only got 4 battens. One of the battens is a half batten, and the batten in the middle, it means that you've got a soft area in the sail, which means that when you pump it, the sail can billow out, bag out lots and lots and lots of low end power. But what you can also do is you then sheet out. It will actually allow the sail to flatten off, and you can spill that power. Incredibly light as well, so it just makes everything feel a lot lighter. Got on it and it felt lovely. It felt just right. It felt very, very balanced in my hands. So again, if something feels right, generally it's right. So I've got a little bit of pictures here. You can see the layout, the shape of the lift compared to so my 5.7 lift and a 5.6 wave sail. You can see the way that it's got very, very long boom. You can see the way it bags and the way the batten works. Yeah, I've got the 6.4 and the 5.7. The 6.4, if I can't get going on that, the only person that's going to be going is probably going to be on like £8,000 or £9,000 worth of kit. You know, carbon race foil, 8, 9, 10 metre sail, you know, that sort of thing. It really is getting me going in absolutely nothing. In fact, this little bit of video here is probably the lightest I've been out in on it. It's probably about 10 miles an hour. You can pump it and it will just keep on building the speed, building the speed, building the speed. So here's that. One of the things that I have been finding now as well is because I'm getting going in very, very little wind, you have to be very, very delicate with what you're doing, because if you do pump with your backhand down the boom, as we all will, when you get up, the foil is working, but you've got very little speed across your mast, and it's very, very easy to start spinning that mast out. And you can see here in this little bit here that I'm going along and I get up and my backhand is still quite a long way down the boom and I oversheet. And of course, as I oversheet with my backhand, what that does is that pushes all of the pressure down through my back leg, and you see the fin at the mast actually start spinning out. Pumping is another technique as well that you do get better with. Early on in my foiling career, I was going out in no wind, and you can't pump in no wind. It's just a physically impossible situation. You have to have something to pump against. So for me, it's about 10 miles an hour is the absolute minimum I think I can get going. These sails have made a huge difference. They do get you a little bit faster, then the foil does start to work. Like I said, my board is designed to go from 0 to 10. Once you get to sort of 7, 8, 9 miles an hour, the foil starts to work. Because the board is then starting to lift, you've now got this additional thing to help you. So as you pump, you can start to pump the foil, which will also give you a little bit of forward motion. And it's a weird feeling when you get it. You start to realise it's happening, and you can get yourself going. Whereas last summer I could have been out probably in 2 or 3 knots more wind and still not got going because I just didn't get that feeling of it. It is hard to explain, but you do get there. It is a technique. Windsurfing is usually it's windy enough. You tend to pump with your backhand. This is more of a sort of a circular motion. You're taking great big scoops of air and you're pulling yourself forward and pulling yourself forward. There's a video by Baz Muller, which is on YouTube at the moment, and he demonstrates it really well. And fun enough, that's actually what I've been doing. I didn't realise that's what I'm doing until I saw it with him. So the foil-specific kit is actually starting to become very, very good, and it does work. So the lift sails have been very good for me. Along with a carbon boom and a very high carbon content carbon mast, it makes a huge difference. And also when uphauling as well, it's a lot lighter, so you're using a lot less energy, which means you can foil for longer. So like with windsurfing, what you've got to do is you've got to bear it away, and you've got to pick up a little bit of speed, which I do, and you can see. But there's been happening a lot where I'm not particularly delicate with it. I've now got to the stage that as soon as I get the board up and flying, I immediately bring my back hand up towards where the harness lines are and continue to pump more of a sort of forward pump rather than the backhand. And since then, I've not had any major problems with spin out because we're just going along so very, very slow now. So that's that bit. So 4 of us went to Gran Canaria a month ago, and Gran Canaria is incredibly windy. We went to a place called Pozo. We went there because we knew it was going to be windy. We knew it was going to be very windy, but we knew it was going to be windy, and we wanted, if possible, 4 or 5 days where we could go foiling every single day. Pozo is known for its sort of chop and waves, but there's a place a bit upwind from the main beach which is protected by a harbour wall, and it's really flat. It's actually pretty good. Unfortunately, it's just very, very windy, so you just go with a smaller sail. So much so that my average sail size for the whole week was 4.2. I was out on a 3.5 on some days, which just shows how windy it was. However, if you just bring the sail size down and control your speed, then there's no difference. So I went back to foiling on the original Naish WS yellow foil, the Delta Wing one. Because there was no issue with wind strength and getting going, I was able to just get planing in the wind and then go, and actually very good fun. Really enjoyed it. It was good fun, nice reactive foil, a lot faster than the XL, very quite turny, quite not particularly stable, but you could get used to it. Had a couple of big offs, but yeah, good fun going backwards and forwards, being hit by some huge gusts, so learning lots of gust control, and yeah, enjoyable. But I still was struggling with the fact that I still felt that I was being held back. There's something wasn't right. Something wasn't feeling. My progression wasn't as quick as I wanted it to be. So, and I'd had a theory that my stability in pitch has always been I'm sort of getting up and then I'm touching down and sort of, yeah, well, it just wasn't right, and it's like I didn't have the time to react, and it wasn't improving. So I started to do a little bit of research, and I came up with the theory that my fuselage on the Naish is quite short. It's quite a short fuse, it's only 64 centimeters long. So, like everything, if you widen the base on something, it should be more stable. With the Naish, it's quite a short fuselage, and with my weight and my height, it's a bit like being on the boom and putting your hands really close together, and you're trying to control a sail like this, whereas we actually like to sail, you know, like that, with a lot more. And of course, as it gets windier, you tend to widen. So, on day 6, one of the guys had a slingshot foil, and we had the plate adapter, so I shoved it on my Naish, and straight off the beach, first run, totally different, just up, going, didn't touch down, unbelievable, just felt right. Went round the corner, got back up, sailed back in, fantastic, went back out, and actually had the confidence to even go for a jibe. Got almost 3/4 of the way round, got to the rig flip, and I just didn't know what to do, so I dropped in. But I haven't been trying jibes because I haven't had the confidence to do it. So we've come home, and I decided that I had pretty much gone as far as I could with my Naish gear. I think I was outside of the parameters that it was designed to do. I put I took a chance with the big front wing, and it worked. But I think that I had taken it as far as I could, and I was no longer progressing, and I needed something fairly drastic. So luckily, because foiling is sort of still growing, there's not a huge amount of second-hand kit out there, and because I had the WS foil and I also had the Naish big foil as well, I managed to actually sell my kit for a very good price, and I put that towards a slingshot setup. I went for the Slingshot F-Wind 1, the original, which has got the H2 wing on it, which is this one, which is about 1,000 square centimetres. The WS wing, the Naish one was 1,200, and the XL foil was 1,500, so a lot smaller. However, this is my strong wind foil. So I won't have a problem getting it going, because at the end of the day I'm not going out and pumping it up in very, very light winds. I'm getting it going in strong wind, and it's more about speed and control. So that one comes with that one. But what I have invested in, because at the end of the day I still want to do this in light winds, I have invested in the Infinity 84. It's 84 centimetres across, but it's huge. It's 2,000 square centimetres. Absolutely massive foil. However, compared to the Naish XL, it isn't as fat. It's not as not as deep. So the Naish used to get me going with pure grunt. It was great. It was very controllable because it was very long, very wide. It was very stable in horizontally, but it was a little bit tippy in the pitch. But because it was so flat-fronted, it wasn't fast, which is good. It's exactly what I wanted, something that was going to get me up and going, and it averaged at around about 13 to 14 miles an hour. That was pretty much the speed that I flew around at all the time. I did get it to 15 or 16, but as soon as you relaxed on the sail, it slowed down again. You'll see here this little bit of video, there's speedometers on it, and you'll see, but you can also see there's almost no wind, and I'm following along quite happily. So back to this one, I've been out on it in fairly strong winds and also almost no wind as well, and it pumps up onto the plane really, really quick. But the difference being is because it is quite thin at the front, it does actually feel faster. Now that might just be because I've got more confidence in it and I can go faster, but the hype and the spiel that's coming from Slingshot is that there is this washout in the wings. I don't know if you can see that, the shape here and here. Basically the design is supposed to be that the faster you go, the flow of water moves outboard, and as it moves outboard, this changes the pitch. So what happens as you go faster is the foil starts to actually nose forward, and as it noses forward, then it stops it lifting, almost self-trimming. I wasn't sure at first, but as I'm going along on it, actually I haven't breached on it. It's not breached once. It just comes up really slowly, and you can get on top of it and you can push it forward, go a bit faster, and as you go faster, it actually seems to become a lot more stable. It's very, very stable in the horizontal, and it's incredibly stable in pitch. And I've put that down to the fact that the stabilizer is bigger than the Naish one. This is the stabilizer that goes with it, which is a lot bigger than the Naish one, but also the fuselage is longer. The Naish one I believe was 64 centimetres long, this one is 78, so it's a lot longer, which if you think about anything where you need a base that is going to be stable, you make it bigger. So if you imagine being on a windsurfing sail and having your hands really close together on the boom, trying to control everything like that, it's going to be quite difficult to do it. You tend to do that, and you've got more ability to move around. So I think that part of my problem with pitch was this very short fuselage. The Slingshot is longer, and I believe with the slightly bigger rear wing, it's making it a lot more stable for me. The improvement for me has been dramatic, very, very quickly. So much so that I'm now hooked in and foiling, hooked in almost the whole time, whereas before I never hooked in. I only had harness lines to hook in when I wasn't actually foiling, so I was just blobbing along and just resting my arms. I'm now foiling and I'm hooked in. Jibes on every single run. I'm not getting them, but I'm trying them. The foil itself feels very, very stable. It just wants to fly, but it doesn't want to fly out, it just wants to fly along. The 84 actually comes with an even bigger rear wing. I don't know if you can see this, but that's the wing I have been using, and this is the other wing that it comes with. It's really, really big. So as it is, I'm using the small one at the moment, but this one I think could be even better for light wind, and I'll let you know on that one how this one works with that. Lots of people on the forum saying that you can use this and it brings the speed even further down to get going in, so we'll see. But yeah, so the big thing for me is I've completely changed over now. I've kept my Naish board. Because the Slingshot, you can get a pedestal mount for it. It still works with the track system in the Naish board. I love the Naish board. It's light, it's very stiff, it's a nice width, foot straps are in a good position. It's also incredibly quick to, as I said, it's designed to go from 0 to 10, and that's what it does, and it gets you going very, very fast, up to 10 miles an hour, where your foil starts to work, and then after that, if you're on the foil, I've always said you could be on a plank of wood, it doesn't matter, it's the foil that you're riding, no longer the board. So I've kept that, and that seems to be going really, really well with it. Another thing I've done as well is I've now moved my sail mast back. I was having this problem of constantly touching down whenever I was hooked in. If I hooked in at all, I couldn't get the board off the water. It would just be like windsurfing. So by moving everything back, what that's done is if I do put a bit of mast foot pressure on, it's not got the leverage to push the nose down. But what it's also done is my balance point on my boom, when the sail was quite far forward, I was having to sort of lean forward in order to control the balance, and of course that was putting pressure on my front foot, which was in turn bringing the nose down. So by bringing the mast back, what it's done, it's now brought the centre of pressure of my sail more in front of me, which keeps the sail more upright, which means that I'm now more equal-footed and I'm able to now control that balance on the board. So it was a fairly simple thing, and it actually works really nicely. The only thing about it, it does make the board a little bit squirrely when it's not planing because the mast is so far back. It does actually help a little bit with uphauling because I've got a little bit more nose to sort of put my left foot or my front foot in front of to make it a little bit more stable. So that's another thing that I was recommended to do, moved it back, and it actually did work. So if, like anything, if someone gives you advice, it's worth giving it a try. If it doesn't work, we'll go back to as you were, but usually if they figured it out themselves, it might work for you. So that was a good tip as well. Another thing as well that has helped me is I was recommended to have a very high boom when I started to learn, and I did have a high boom. It was about this high when I'm standing on the board. Consequently, I had very long harness lines, which meant that I could get in and out of them. Part of the problem of me once I was getting up and not being able to get in the harness was when I was getting up and I was hooking in, these harness lines are so long that I actually wasn't able to really relax my arms, so I ended up sort of like sticking my butt out, and it wasn't a good position, and it was just easier for me in the end just to sail along out of the harness, which is good because my fitness has gone up, and I actually sailed one day for over an hour, didn't hook in once, and was foiling the whole time. But what I have done is I've always windsurfed with a fairly low boom and quite short harness lines, and it was just a mistake I did one day. I went out and I hadn't adjusted my boom properly, and I went out, pumped up onto the plane, realised my boom was quite short, was quite low, and actually it worked, it was fine, but also my harness lines were way too long, and I couldn't do anything with them. So I sailed along with my boom quite low, but then I came back into the beach and I changed my harness lines for much shorter ones, and I actually managed to start getting in the harness lines, and because they were short and I was upright and the sail was quite close, I actually felt that it was actually doing some good, so I started to try and use the harness lines a little bit more. Saying that, as now I'm on this different kit, and I've got this, I feel more stable. That setup works for me now. I'm back to about this high on the boom, but because my harness lines are quite short, I've got 28s, I'm hooking in and I'm going, and it just feels comfortable. So it's all these tiny little things that can be wrong that will cause great big problems, and it's a case of just trying to iron out one at a time. You may be lucky and you'll just get it and it'll be fine, but I've had so many small problems that have been trying to figure out, and it's now I've figured out all these little things, and this isn't working, and I've found something that now works, and I'm the last 4 times I've been out, I have improved probably more each time I've come out than probably the 3-4 months beforehand. So it's just getting better and better. So much so that I went to the beach last week, and it was probably 25, 30, probably gusting 35 miles an hour, and I didn't really fancy windsurfing because it was so choppy, because we've got a sea wall that bounces everything back. It was horrible, but we all just said, let's go foiling. So I stuck a 4 metre on and put my 90 centimetre mast on with the H2 blue wing on, and it was brilliant. It was great. We went out and we were floating above all of the chop. The windsurfers were on 4.7s and quite well powered up, but you could just see it was horrible for them. They were smashing through the chop. The tide was going out, so it was wind with tide. They were really slogging up wind, and a few of them had to come back and walk up the beach. We were gliding around. In fact, at some points we were struggling to come back downwind because we were going upwind so well. So for me now, it's gone from light wind, but it's also now the ability. Now I've got this confidence to get out in 25-30 miles an hour of wind, and it feels great because you get the swells, and you can actually now start to get on them and use them and carve onto them, and even think about maybe doing a jibe on one. So a really good feeling. So the progression has been huge, and it's just sometimes such a small little thing that will suddenly you'll get it, and it'll improve you. I learned something when I was in Pozo, because I was upwind so far I couldn't get downwind. So what I was doing was staying out of the foot straps, getting onto the foil and staying out of the foot straps and coming downwind, and because the sail was so open I needed quite a wide stance to counter it, but leaning back and actually surfing the foil almost downwind with no pressure in the sail, and that was a lovely feeling. So actually going upwind, really hammering, going around the jibe, falling in, water starting, but then getting going with a really wide, and it felt like surfing on air. It really did, and that is something now that I actually really look forward to doing, going upwind, coming back in. And if you can pick up a little swell, we don't get massive swells where we are, but you can get a little bit of wind-blown chop at maybe 2 or 3 feet. You do feel that board start to pick up that energy, and you can almost feel the sail go completely light, and that is a lovely feeling to get that. So it just, each time I'm going out, I'm starting to get more and more, oh, I like that, this is good, I'm like that, I want to try this and this, that and the other. So the learning curve is just now absolutely off the scale. So I don't know, really, my next video might not be for another while, but it'll be probably more of how I've been getting on with these different foils, but probably really it's going to be jibing. That's going to be the next big thing. This thing stays up on the foil for ages, and it just seems to want to go round, so it's now a case of me just trying to get round the corner and flick the rig and do the foot change. But yeah, it's good. And I actually haven't kite surfed now for over a year, and I've windsurfed twice while I was in Pozo, and it was hard work, and to be quite honest, for me it wasn't as enjoyable as the foiling. So this really is an amazing sport to get into, and it's not as hard on your body. You can sail for longer. I sailed for nearly 3 hours on one day, and if I did that windsurfing I would have had no palms left, all my hands would have gone, but it isn't an issue. So it's a lot easier on your body, but it's the subtleties. You really do dial into your kit. So if you're going through the learning process, just keep going. Don't give up. Just keep going. You will get it. Remember, you do need a bit of wind. Obviously not too much, but you can always change down a sail size. I have found that if you can't water start, certainly for me, if I cannot water start, there probably isn't enough wind. And I know on the videos they're saying if you can water start, you're probably going to be overpowered, but I actually can water start in very, very light winds. So if I can't water start, it doesn't matter how much I pump, I probably ain't going to get it. So if you can water start with real, you can get up, but it's not yanking you up, but you can, it's a difficult water start, but you can get up, that's probably about right. And if you think, if you think that you haven't got enough sail up, you probably haven't. You do need to do it. And if you are a little bit overpowered, at least you're going. That's the most important thing. At least you're going. You can always sheet out. So I suffered last year with going out on a 5.5 metre sail when there was about 10 knots of wind. It was never going to happen. Even now, with the abilities I've got on my kit, 10 miles an hour, I still need a very, very good foil-specific 6.4 to get going. You will learn the technique, but there is still physics involved. You do need a certain amount of power to get you going. As big a foil as you can get, because it will make learning easier. You'll be foiling for longer. You'll also be foiling slower. It's all about confidence, and if you're fearing falling in and hurting yourself, you won't learn. It's as simple as that. So really, really keep on. Don't give up. Really nice of you all to be sending messages. I always try and answer your questions. Hopefully what I've gone through will be helping you and giving you that inspiration to carry on. I am just a normal windsurfing, kitesurfing guy. I have been windsurfing for 30 years, I've been kitesurfing for 20 years. I would say I'm above average. I'm not like a superb windsurfer, a superb kitesurfer. So just probably a normal person trying to do this, which is why I'm not a 60 kilo sort of athlete who just picks this up easily. It has been a struggle, but the kit is now starting to get out there where it will help you. Foil specific sails, really decent foils. Last year it was all about speed and going fast and stuff like that. I think the companies have realised now that actually people just want to get out and foil and they just want to float around. They don't want to do 30 knots, they just want to be up. So the bigger foils are starting to come out. This Slingshot foil has had very, very good reviews from lots and lots of people, and I've used it and I can't rate it highly enough. The 4 times I've been out on it have been absolutely fantastic. So it will, if it helps you get going, and if someone can get up to the standard I'm at in like a month, and maybe 10 sessions, then happy days, great. Nothing better than being out on the water with 3 or 4 friends and you're all in a little pod all gliding around together, and that is big smiles. So just keep on, don't give up, and so if you can also post the videos of your learning as well, it's always good to see people and how you're getting on. So yeah, cool, hope you enjoy, see you on the next one.